Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to this IC on terrorism and its management. We all have been doing terrorism, and it's a topic very close to our hearts. However simple this surgery may be, it needs to be done with a meticulous approach. So in this IC, we will be basically discussing an overview about terrorism surgery, the different topics, the different methods of excision, then terrorism in difficult situations like recurrent terrorism, double-headed terrorism, terrorism with muscle involvement or extraocular movement restrictions, and also about managing terrorism and cataract, and management of terrorism with coexistent glaucoma. So my colleagues in this IC are Dr. Aarti, Dr. Mukesh, um, Dr. Shah, and Dr. Kalyani. I welcome you all, and with everybody's permission, shall I start the first talk, which is an overview on terrorism?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So basically, coming to the indications for terrorism excision, the first and foremost is decreased vision with induced astigmatism. Any terrorism threatening the visual axis, like this grade 4 terrorism. Terrorism with extraocular movement restrictions. Typically, it happens in case of recurrent pterygia with multiple surgeries. Any pterygium which causes a chronically irritable eye and a cosmetic blemish. Recurrent pterygia, double-headed pterygia. And sometimes we see a situation where the lesion appears very suspicious. Either there is a raised lesion or a flat leukoplegic lesion with increased vascularity, and there may be a CIN or a OSSN, which may present like a pterygium. So we should basically know this grading of the pterygium. Uh, the first classification is depending upon the encroachment in the cornea, and the second classification is depending upon the visibility of the fleshiness or the thickness of the pterygia and the visibility of the underlying vessels. This is more important because the more fleshy pterygium, more it is associated with, likely to be associated with recurrence, and the management needs to be a little different than the routine surgery. Very briefly, the etiopathogenesis, we know that the solar or the UV radiation, it induces the localized limbal stem cell deficiency, leading to the ingrowth of fibrovascular tissue. There is also genetic alteration of the limbal stem cells. So the basal epithelial cells of the limbal epithelium, they invade the corneal stroma, and they destroy the Bowman's layer and invade the stroma, causing the fibrovascular ingrowth. There may be oxidative stress also responsible for pterygium. Histopathology shows accumulation of eosinophilic granular material, which is degenerated collagen with fragmented fibers representing abnormal elastic tissue. So pterygium is often labeled as elastotic degeneration. Coming to techniques of pterygium excision, Bayer sclera technique is no longer practiced. It basically involved excision of pterygium and leaving the defect to heal by itself from the surrounding conjunctiva. We know that it's a least satisfactory method with very high recurrence rate, up to 75%. Uh, there are articles combining Bayer sclera with adjuvants like mitomycin C or a partial thickness sclerectomy. But even these methods have shown very high and unacceptable rates of pterygium recurrence. If it's a small pterygium, then a simple conjunctival closure may suffice. Another popular method is conjunctival rotation flaps or pedicle grafts, which also have a lower recurrence rate than the Bayer sclera method, especially because the pedicle graft provides vascularity and helps for taking up the graft very nicely. So this is also practiced by many clinicians. Another popular method is amniotic membrane grafting. We know that amniotic membrane basically consists of a epithelial basement membrane and avascular stromal layer, and it acts as a biological substrate or contact lens. It has anti-inflammatory, anti-scarring, anti-neovascular properties, so it serves as an effective barrier to heal, to cover the conjunctival defect after the pterygium excision. Cryopreserved amniotic membrane is preferred because it retains the biological activity compared to a dehydrated one, and this is a less time-consuming technique. Patient is more comfortable post-operatively, preserves the conjunctiva of future surgeries, and especially useful for recurrent pterygia with extensive symblepharon formation. So this is a large study about AMG in pterygia, 556 eyes, and they have found that the recurrence was 5.8% with this technique. There are various studies comparing amniotic membrane with conjunctival autograft and adjuvants for pterygium surgery, and they have found no significant difference in the recurrence rate among these three groups. This is a meta-analysis or a mega trial, Cochrane systematic review of 20 randomized controlled trials in 1947 eyes of pterygia undergoing either a conjunctival autograft or amniotic membrane transplantation, and they found that the CLAG or CAG was better technique with lesser rates of recurrence compared to amniotic membrane graft, which had higher rate of recurrence. Another technique described in pterygium surgery is the perfect technique described by Dr. First from Australia, which is pterygium extended removal followed by extended conjunctival transplant, which basically meant excising the whole of the fibrovascular tissue with the whole of the tenons right up to the medial canthus or plica, and then covering it with a large conjunctival graft. In his study, it has given very good cosmetic results and very less recurrence rate. Another technique is conjunctival limbal autograft, which is considered as a gold standard in pterygium surgery. It has been described by Kenyon way back in 1985. And basically in this, the conjunctival limbal graft is harvested from the superior bulbar conjunctiva and sutured to the scleral bed. So very basics of this technique include either excising, avulsing it, then a superficial keratectomy, then the body of pterygium with its attachment to the tenons capsule, including the check ligaments, they are dissected. Size of the scleral bed is measured, and that required size conjunctival graft is taken from the superotemporal quadrant, because it is covered by the lid and it will give protection against the solar radiation, and it will prevent recurrence or inadvertent stem cell deficiency in that area. And as thin graft as possible is taken without buttonholing. After reaching the limbus, the graft is flipped over and excised, and then it is attached to the scleral bed, either using the 80 Vicryl sutures or using fibrin glue. If we are using fibrin glue, then the surface needs to be very dry. The graft needs to be as thin as possible without any tenons inclusion. Generally, thrombin and fibrin are used separately, and thrombin is placed on the sclera and fibrin on the undersurface of the graft before attaching it, and opposition time of 1 to 2 minutes is required. So advantages, we know that less operating time, less post-operative discomfort, less inflammation. Because is it over? Can I continue for another 1 or 2 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So it is supposedly causes less inflammation because it creates a tight seal around the graft. And there are various, again, RCTs and meta-analysis comparing fibrin glue with pterygium surgery. most of which have showed fibrin glue to be advantageous than the sutures with less post-operative inflammation and less rate of recurrence. Another modification used is so-called autologous serum or so-called no glue, no suture surgery, in which the patient's own blood is used as a medium to attach the graft, and it is suitable for small and medium sized graft, but it has shown in large pterygia it has shown more rate of graft displacement and retraction. So these are the adjuvants that are used in the pterygium surgery, most commonly mitomycin C and 5-FU. They are used intraoperatively rather than post-operative drops or injections. And especially they are useful in the recurrent pterygia, but we should be aware of the risk of corneal or scleral melt many weeks or months or even years after the pterygium surgery. Another useful agent is Avastin, which can be used as a intrastromal or intralesional agent, and topical cyclosporin A drops, especially with lot of post-operative inflammation. Another modification in pterygium treatment is a mini slit procedure, in which small limbal biopsy is taken, shredded into pieces, and it is placed over the amniotic membrane. Something similar to a slit procedure, but with a pterygium excision. For extensive pterygia occupying the visual axis and with residual corneal thinning and scarring, we may have to combine it with lamellar keratoplasty. But of course, it's a technical challenging procedure, with an availability of donor tissue is of importance in this. Split conjunctival grafts have also been tried, especially for double-headed pterygia, where you need to mobilize a lot of conjunctiva. Like all other surgeries, this surgery is also not free of complications. We sometimes see granulomas after the surgery. We see hematomas under the graft. Sometimes the absorbing glue gives a characteristic yellowish tinge to the graft. Necrosis of CLAG is seen where the CLAG has been flipped, placed in the reverse way, that is stromal side up. So it's very important to mark the graft before we put it in the on the scleral bed. Necrosis is also seen if it's a very thick graft with tenons, lot of tenons, which basically compromises the adherence to the underlying scleral bed, and it can lead to avascularity or necrosis. Displaced AMG, displaced CLAG, lost graft, all these are seen. Also is seen donor site inflammation, especially when a large graft is taken or when it's done in a young individual where there is a lot of underlying tenons. Recurrence after every technique is seen. Generally the recurrence rate between 5 to 10% with the techniques described just now. This is a small study which we are doing currently at HVDSI. We have enrolled 150 patients of primary pterygia from grade 1 to 4. And what we have observed is, obviously after the excision, we are doing a conjunctival limbal autograft with fibrin glue. And after the excision, we see remarkable improvement in the UCVA, BCVA, remarkable improvement in the spherical equivalent and the refractive error. We also see reduction in the astigmatism, which is more better outcomes in obviously grade 2 or grade 3 grafts compared to grade 4 ones. So this is what finally we want to achieve in a pterygium, a very good cosmesis, a very well taken graft without any recurrence over a long period of time, and improvement in vision. So this was in short about the overview of pterygium surgery. Now I request Dr. Aarti to take over to moderate the session and to continue with her talk.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the great start. I request you to stop your screen share so that I will share mine. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Arti.
Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank Team Moss and Dr. Shilpa Joshi ma'am for this wonderful opportunity. So, literature have described various surgical techniques for the removal of pterygium, suggesting no single approach is universally successful. Recurrence is the most challenging complication following pterygium surgery. Since recurrence is much more aggressive when compared to the primary lesion, it is important to choose the primary procedure that has highest success rate. So there are various indications for removal of pterygium, like visual loss from proximity to visual axis, threatening the visual axis, visual loss from astigmatism, eye movement restriction, atypical appearance such as possible dysplasia, observed growth by ophthalmologist, reported growth by patient, symptoms of irritation, cosmetic concerns, to name a few. As in every surgery, counseling plays an important role. Patient must be told the risk of recurrence in future. So which anesthesia to use for the surgery? Injection of subconjunctival anesthesia may be effective enough, but it prevents the surgical maneuver to be undertaken in extended conjunctival dissections and does not restrict eye movement. Injection of peribulbar anesthesia seemed to be the most controlled and functionally acceptable way of undertaking the more surgically involved procedures. For small and simple pterygium, I prefer topical anesthesia. So surgery should aim at complete excision of pterygium at the Bowman's level, minimizing the astigmatism and scarring by smooth dissection, minimal damage to the sclera, minimizing the chances of recurrence. Various surgical options are available to manage pterygium. Let's see them one by one. So bare sclera closure technique involves the removal of the pterygium and leaving the defect to heal from the surrounding conjunctiva. Sometimes the conjunctiva is left free to adhere to the underlying sclera, and occasionally the conjunctiva is sutured to the sclera, leaving the defect. Bare sclera without adjunctive therapy or additional surgical intervention is no longer an ethically acceptable method of removal. Simple conjunctival closure involves the removal of the pterygium with minimal conjunctival excision, and then the conjunctiva is closed with sutures, leaving behind very little or no bare sclera. The third in the list is sliding conjunctival flaps. After removal of a pterygium, a variety of methods for closing the defect have been described. That includes using inferior and superior sliding conjunctival flaps. The reported recurrence rate with this technique range from less than 1% to over 5%. Complications reported are minimal to nil. Some of the reported complications are flap retraction and cyst formation. The surgery is technically challenging and the results can be suboptimal. The first real advancement in the surgical management of pterygium was the outline of the technique of conjunctival limbal autograft transplantation after pterygium excision described by Kenyon in 1985. This technique involves the excision of the pterygium, leaving an area of bare sclera, which is then closed by a free conjunctival transplant from another part of the ocular surface, mostly from the superotemporal limbus. Various studies have been done using this technique. Recurrence rate reported is as low as 2% and as high as 40%. This technique appears to reconstruct a more normal limbal anatomy, resulting in a better cosmesis with respect to vascularization. It has better acceptable recurrence rate when compared with the other procedures. No major complications from this method apart from loss of graft have been reported. Pterygium extended removal followed by extended conjunctival transplant was first described by Dr. Hertz from Australia. In this technique, extensive conjunctival autografting of about 15 mm by 12 mm is performed. Reported recurrence rates with this procedure is 0.5%. The graft edge and the surgical scars are hidden in pharynxes and caruncle, which make this technique more cosmetically acceptable, but it still remains a time-consuming and technically challenging procedure. I have no personal experience with this technique. Free conjunctival autograft, let's talk about that. In the eyes with pterygium where there have been previous ocular surgery or limbal damage, surgical manipulations while removing a limbal graft may promote further damage to stem cells. Tan et al. Proposed utilization of free conjunctival grafts, which may have equivalent outcome in these cases. However, for recurrent pterygium, limbal conjunctival autografts are more effective than conjunctival autografts. It will be discussed in details by Dr. Ketki in her talk. In patients with an existing superior conjunctival bleb, other superior conjunctival pathology, or in anticipation of the need to perform a glaucoma surgery superiorly, surgery can be performed using the tissue from the inferior bulbar conjunctiva. Conjunctival rotation autograft was first described by Tan et al. The conjunctiva over the body of the pterygium is removed and stored in saline. The rest of the surgery is then performed to excise the pterygium. The tissue is then replaced and sutured in situ in the bare scleral bed, with the limbal aspect of the graft facing the follicle. This technique is utilized for cases in which it is not possible or not desirable to use the superior conjunctiva as a donor source, like double pterygia, glaucoma surgery, and so on. Amniotic membrane have been used as a biological tissue substitute after pterygium excision. Properties like anti-scarring, anti-angiogenic, and anti-inflammatory make it useful in the management of pterygium. It eliminates the need for harvesting the large grafts. Recurrence rate with this technique ranges from 12 to 40%. Delayed vascularization of amniotic membrane is assumed to be liable for the delayed recurrence following pterygium excision. Though this technique avoids the necessity for harvesting conjunctival autografts, neither the cosmesis nor the recurrence rates compare favorably with conjunctival autograft. Other advances in this developing world of ophthalmology, there have been many other advances in management of pterygium. Instead of sutures, fibrin glue or autologous serum have been used to approximate the graft on the scleral bed. Fibrin glue is utilized as an alternative to sutures for conjunctival autograft attachment after the pterygium excision. Advantages are it reduces the surgical time, complications, and post-op discomfort to the patient. Disadvantages being potential risk of infection, hypersensitivity reactions, and potential risk for dehiscence, and higher associated costs. Autologous serum may be a potential alternative for fibrin glue and sutures for conjunctival autograft fixation, at least for small to average size grafts. It is effective in securing conjunctival autografts with least complications and good cosmesis. Reported complications include graft displacement and graft failure. No conclusive evidence is made regarding the effect of using anti-VEGF in the treatment of pterygium. Without surgery, anti-VEGF alone could reduce the symptoms and vascularity, but does not cause pterygium regression. However, questions regarding the optimal route and dosage of anti-VEGF administration is still unanswered. Every surgical intervention comes with some risk. There are various complications reported when it comes to pterygium surgery as well. Complications can occur both intraoperatively and postoperatively. So I'll end my presentation here. Thank you very much.
So thank you, everyone. I now invite Dr. Ketki for her talk on conquering complexities in pterygium. Dr. Ketki, you are on mute. So kindly unmute yourself.
Yes, unmuted. Unmuted. I have unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are good to go. We can see your presentation.
Yes, yes. First of all, I would like to thank our organizing, Moscow Organizing Scientific Committee for giving us the opportunity for presenting this common, but yet it needs to be discussed topic, that is pterygium and its related complications. I am Dr. Ketki. I would like to talk about the complex pterygium and its management in this topic. And I would also like to thank Dr. Shilpa Joshi Madam and Dr. Aarti for giving me this opportunity to being a part of this IC. As we have already seen, pterygium is a fibroelastotic degeneration of subconjunctival tissue. The pathology lies in the subconjunctival level, but excessive UV rays exposure, hot, dry climate is considered to be pathological factor in the pterygium progression. Also, abnormal p53 gene expression on chromosome 17 is considered as a responsible factor for the progression of the pterygium. Pterygium can cause visual impairment due to astigmatism. If it progresses to the pupillary area, then also it can cause diminution of vision, reduced ocular motility, irritation, watering. These are the symptoms which require our attention. It can be complicated by its varied presentation. This slide is not going ahead, Tushar.
Dr. Ketki, just click on the presentation once and then you try to change it.
I'll do. So what are the types of pterygium which require our special attention? That is double pterygium, then recurrent pterygium. If pterygium associated with symblepharon formation, pseudopterygium. So first we would like to discuss about double pterygium. Normally, pterygium has preponderance for the nasal side. As temporal, mainly light comes from the temporal side and it gets attached with the nasal side and causing nasal more pterygium. But when in double pterygium, it occurs from both nasal and temporal side. As we have already seen in the Dr. Aarti's presentation, that conjunctival autografting is a treatment of choice for the primary pterygium. But as this double pterygium grows from both sides, the Bayer sclera might not get covered by conjunctival autograft in this type of situation. So amniotic membrane grafting can be a method of choice for the treatment. Amniotic membrane is it is available commercially as an etiosterile membrane, either in the dry or wet form. It needs to be secured on the Bayer sclera after removing pterygium tissue with 10-0 nylon or 6-0 Vicryl sutures. But again, the cost factor for the pterygium, cost factor for amniotic membrane and its availability issues, especially in the rural areas, are definitely there. Also, dry amniotic membrane is not that elastic as wet. So even if dry amniotic membrane is used, the inelasticity of the membrane will cause retraction of the tissue. Also, and this technique requires suturing either with nylon or Vicryl. So again, it can cause fibrosis. Kodavur et al. In 2019 have come up with a very novel technique especially for double pterygium. It's called vertical split graft technique. As you can see in the first picture, this is a double pterygium. After removing the pterygium tissue thoroughly, we have to remove subepithelial tissue also. They have cut the conjunctival autograft into vertically 2 halves. So they have split the conjunctival tissue into 2 halves, and these tissues has been secured on the 2 sides, that is nasal and temporal, over Bayer sclera, again with 10-0 nylon sutures. This technique they have reported very low recurrence rate, and as you can see in the last picture, after 6 months of follow-up, the conjunctival tissue is totally taken up, the pterygium tissue is totally covered, and the conjunctiva is totally covered with the graft which they have put. It needs suture removal after some months or in a graded fashion, but it covers Bayer sclera completely. And this technique has been really found useful in the progressive double pterygium cases with very low recurrence rate. So by now we have till now we have seen double pterygium, and for the double pterygium amniotic membrane we are taking as a method of choice, and for really progressive double pterygium vertical split graft technique can be also be used. There is one technique called as perfect, that is pterygium extended removal followed by extended conjunctival transplant, is advised by Hurst and Smallcombe in 2016. They have reported very low recurrence, as low as 0.5% with this technique. In this, they have extensively removed Tenon's capsule from above, below, and over the rectus muscle. And they have also removed the semilunar folds. So it creates a very large area of bare sclera, and then they covered that area with thin conjunctival autograft, which was taken from superior area. They have got excellent results in the post-operative period, and both double pterygium has been treated well. This technique is very useful in preventing recurrence. So after double pterygium, now I would like to talk about recurrent pterygium. Pterygiums after surgery, it can recur within months of removal. As we have already seen, bare sclera technique has the highest rate of recurrence. So we advocate conjunctival autografting with fibrin glue as the modality of treatment for recurrent pterygium. But fibrin glue has again high cost. There is risk of transmission of parvovirus B19 and prions. So now use of autologous serum instead of for securing conjunctival autograft is a preferred technique. Our main aim in recurrent pterygium to avoid fibrosis. So without suturing, either we can use fibrin glue or conjunctival autograft. Any method can be useful to prevent fibrosis, because in this patient already too much fibrosis is present. Also in recurrent pterygium, use of mitomycin C, which is an alkylating agent inhibiting DNA synthesis, is found to be very useful. Intraoperative use of 0.02% of mitomycin C should be used for the 3 minutes on bare sclera, which will prevent pterygium recurrence. Post-operative, also MMC drops in 4 times in a day in tapering dosage should be advocated in such cases. But side effects like Dalen formation and scleral melt have been reported, as it is an antimitotic agent. So it should be used with caution. Third category is there is synblepharon with pterygium. So there are many patients with chemical injuries or burn patient. They have synblepharon along with pterygium that can lead to their reduced ocular motility and decrease in visual acuity. So in such cases, we advise synblepharon release with conjunctival autograft without suturing. In post-operative period, topical anti-inflammatory drops are also required. Topical anti-inflammatory and steroid drops are required for more time in post-operative period. So to conclude, I would just like to say pterygium can be complicated due to double pterygium, recurrent pterygium, or synblepharon. Amniotic membrane split grafts and mitomycin are the available options. Thin graft with clear Tenon's dissection is the key to success for pterygium surgery and for early visual rehabilitation and improving ocular motility. I thank everybody for patient listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ketki, for that wonderful talk. I now invite Dr. Mukesh Paryani. He is going to talk to us about impact of pterygium on corneal topography and management of coexisting cataract. So over to you, Dr. Mukesh.
Yeah, is my voice clear and my slides visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Your slides are visible.
Yeah.
You are good to go.
Yeah, so my topic is pterygium topography and the associated cataract with it. Thank you so much, Dr. Shilpa ma'am, Aarti, and MOS for the opportunity. So we know, by now we know what is the effect of pterygium on our visual acuity, on different parameters, including the dry eyes, the vision affection, the irregular astigmatism that is caused by the pterygium. How does it affect the topography and the IOL power calculation, and how do we manage cataract with it is the scope of my presentation today. I present you this very interesting case with a patient with a bilateral pterygium. You can see how nicely the pterygium is indenting on the nasal sides, both the eyes on the nasal side. The right eye affected more than the left eye. We can see that the amount of flattening it has caused. So if we see the central 3 millimeter zone, the flattening here is 36.7 diopters as compared to 43.5, which is the freer side. That is the amount of pull that pterygium is causing onto the cornea, and you can see it in both the eyes. So what it does is, it causes an astigmatism, but it's a highly irregular astigmatism. And that is why you have these patients with high amount of minor cylinders at around 160, 170 degrees, but these are very, very irregular astigmatisms. What pterygium surgery does, it reduces the toricity of the cornea. Not only reduces the toricity of the cornea, but it reduces the irregular astigmatism, reduces the symptoms and reduces the dryness, regularizes the surface. There are studies which have proven beyond doubt that surface asymmetry index, surface regularity index are improved in the corneal topography, along with the improvement in the best corrected and the uncorrected visual acuity of the patients. This is a very beautiful picture from the IGO published in 2007. We can see a toricity of around 7 diopters, irregular astigmatism, going down to barely a diopter astigmatism in the post-operative period. Nowadays, we have seen the surgeries, surgical techniques improvement, and nowadays we are into autologous serum that we use for the graft sutureless pterygium surgery. The outcomes have become brilliant and the faster recovery happens in patients. But what do we do when we have a pterygium and a cataract together? Well, it's been said, and ideally, yes, the pterygium surgery first if the cataract is not so urgent. Pterygium surgery has to be dealt. What it does is regularizes the cornea. We'll have a much better IOL power calculation and then perhaps plan the cataract surgery. But what if the patients have mature cataract with a pterygium? What if the patients are coming from really far and might not be able to follow up? We see a lot of, being a tertiary eye care center, we at HV Desai see a lot of patients who are coming from very far. They travel almost 6 to 8 hours in a day. They come for a day and they have very less facilities available with them at the local site. So what to do in these cases? What if we combine pterygium and cataract surgery? What are the things that come to our mind? We have a prolonged procedure time. We have less reliable biometry. We know post the pterygium has been taken off, there is a bump in the topographic values. We see a myopic shift coming to the patient, and there's a reduced efficacy of reducing the spherical equivalent post-operatively if I am doing a combined surgery as compared to a sequential surgery where I do the pterygium first, followed by the cataract surgery at a later time. We are in a pterygium belt. Western Maharashtra is called a pterygium belt. We have huge prevalence of pterygium in our population. Coexisting cataract happens in most of the patients in the old age group. What combined surgery would do is it will reduce the discomfort of a double procedure, direct and indirect cost to the patient as well as to the service provider. The question that came to our mind was whether the uncorrected and the best corrected visual acuity will be comparable to sequential surgery, and this was a surgery which was headed by Dr. Shilpa Joshi ma'am at HV Desai Eye Hospital. So there were 60 patients who were enrolled in 2 arms, where the first arm performed the combined surgery and the second was a sequential surgery where pterygium with clag was performed first, followed by the cataract surgery a month post-operatively. Please note that we did not take the pterygia which are more than grade 2 pterygia, because those cataracts, those would have been a lot of bias otherwise in the outcomes. What we really found is a final unaided visual acuity was slightly better in a sequential group, but there was no statistical difference between the two. This was the unaided visual acuity, and the final spherical equivalent, if we see in the combined group, was around minus 1.17 diopters as compared to a sequential group was 0.78 diopter, but still it was not at all statistically significant difference between the two. And so even in the astigmatism, there was no statistical difference between the two at the end of 3 months. So what we concluded is if the patient's cataract is fairly high and the cataract is not really urgent and the patient can follow up later for a cataract surgery after proper counseling, then perhaps combined is certainly not a good option. But if I have a patient who's got a mature cataract, poor socioeconomic background, has to travel a lot, doesn't have medical facilities at the present center, then for those particular patients, combined surgery is still a viable option, not only proven in our studies, but also multiple studies have proven that. So to conclude that study is the patients achieved a good visual outcome, whether it was sequential arm or it was a combined arm. Also, it came to note that there were some patients who did not follow up for the cataract surgery because their main complaint of diminution of vision was not addressed in the first surgery, that is the pterygium surgery. I'll just take one more minute. We know that the IOL power calculation in these patients is a little difficult. Myopic shift occurred in simultaneous cataract surgery and pterygium surgery patients because, as I said, there will be a bump in the topographic value which will lead to the myopic shift, and their topographic changes are associated with the pterygium size. Larger the pterygium size, there will be more astigmatism, more irregular astigmatism. So is there any role of toric IOL is my question. So certainly it has a role. It has very limited role. Never when the pterygium is still in place. We have to remove the pterygium, wait for a topographic stabilization, and always under promise. The image on the right is a patient who had a temporal pterygium removed and there was a scar over there and had a lot of toricity. With a lot of under promise explained to the patient, we planned a toric IOL. Despite preoperative 7 diopters, we landed up with a 2.2 diopters cylinder post-operatively, but that served a purpose. The patient was fairly very happy. So to conclude my talk, topographic changes are significant and so is its visual impact. Sequential surgery is certainly a preferred mode, but mind you, the patients who require the early visual rehabilitation, who are difficult to follow up for a later surgery, a combined surgery would do still wonders in them. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the time.
I just have a question for Dr. Mukesh. One question just. Sir, in combined surgery, have you done temporal cataract surgery? Like,
no, usually the pterygia are usually temporal or nasal. So I usually take, if it's a nasal, then I sit a little bit of either superior or a superotemporal, and I take a graft between the two.
Okay. So like from superior only, no, you have taken grafts.
If it's totally nasal, you can go absolute temporal and finish off the cataract surgery. You have entire superior and superotemporal area for a graft.
Yes, because in here we have this approach of doing temporal cataract surgery. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, but if it's a temporal pterygium, you come a little superior or superonasal actually, so that you have enough area for the graft to be taken from the superotemporal area.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Am I right,
Just-
Shilpa ma'am? You want to add?
Yeah, no, just a comment in relation to Mukesh's talk. He presented about the role of toric IOLs. The main inhibition or the main hesitance we face is that patients are likely to have a lot of residual corneal opacity post-pterygium excision. So should we advise toric IOLs? Will they give those? Is it worthwhile subjecting the patient to pay that much? One of the modifications that we can do is use of a diamond burr, which can which can really reshape the cornea very nicely and reduce the extent of residual corneal opacity. And perhaps then, and suppose, I mean, the pterygium not very extensive, great to use of a diamond burr, a nice graft, and maybe then we are justified in using a toric IOL. Also about the IOL power calculation, as Mukesh has said, that the myopic shift occurs, and that's why there is overestimation of the IOL power. So what we do is reduce 0.5 or even 1 diopter from the final IOL power that is calculated when we are doing a combined surgery. So that has given us good results overall in this combined surgery.
So thank you so much, Dr. Mukesh. So we have learned how to manage a case of pterygium and coexisting cataract. Let's see what happens when we have glaucoma with the pterygium case. So I now invite Dr. Kalyani ma'am to share her screen. She's going to talk to us on pterygium in a glaucoma patient. What do I do now? So over to you, Kalyani ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I thank organizers as well as Dr. Shilpa and Arati for giving me and encouraging me into the pterygium, and I'm glad to be here. Yeah, today my topic is pterygium in a glaucoma patients. What do I do now? As we heard, most of the speakers have spoken that about the pterygium, we know the pterygium Greek word means wings. It is a non-malignant, slow, progressive proliferation of the wing-shaped fibrovascular tissue in the limbal conjunctival area. Most commonly, it is seen in dry climate with the prevalence of 22% in equatorial areas and the tropics. And there is a strong association between the UV light exposure and exposure to the dusty climate leads to the formation of the pterygium. And it causes the alteration in the ocular surface as well as the tear film. And many of the patients, initially, they may be asymptomatic, or there may be some symptoms like redness, grittiness, watering, and the foreign body sensation. As we heard, the type of pterygium we can classify according to the extent of the pterygium. And now the important consideration is when the pterygium and the glaucoma are associated, then how to plan about whether to operate or not, or what are the intraoperative considerations, and what is the postoperative regime we need to think about. When to operate the pterygium in the glaucoma patients? If they are like minimum of symptoms, then mostly we should manage medically with the tear substitutes, topical steroids, when the pterygium is in the inflammatory stage. And otherwise, we can use the sunglasses to reduce the UV exposure and further reduction of the growth stimulus. The surgery can be considered in the following cases: when the advanced pterygia encroaching onto the pupillary area, when there is a rapid progression, or if it is causing severe symptoms like redness, watering, pain, and foreign body sensation, when it is causing significant astigmatism and the patient is cosmetically asking for the pterygium removal, then we need to consider for the surgery. And in glaucoma patients, we need to think about whether to treat pterygium first or the glaucoma we need to address. It depends on the stage of the disease of the glaucoma. If it is the initial stage, then we can medically manage and treat the pterygium. If the advanced stage, we need to address the glaucoma because it may cause rapid progression of the glaucoma and the nerve damage. So patients of glaucoma may need trabeculectomy or the glaucoma drainage devices in the later part of their treatment of glaucoma. Then there is a need that we need to save the superior conjunctiva. So we need to consider for the inferior conjunctiva to take for the autograft. Our alternative method can be amniotic membrane we can utilize. As we heard, most of you speakers have told that there are the many methods that we can utilize: conjunctival autograft or modification of the autograft, rotational grafting, and conjunctival amniotic membrane transplantation we can utilize for the treatment of pterygium. And most important is after pterygium, we need to treat the patient with the tear substitutes, steroids, and anti-inflammatory agents and antibiotics. The steroid usage, we should be very cautious because it may lead to the steroid-induced glaucoma. I want to address a little more about this steroid-induced glaucoma because it can progress the glaucoma very fast, or it may increase the IOP more because of the steroids. So first described by 1950, Dr. Gordon and McLean, they have observed that rise in IOP caused by the administration of the steroids. When we call the steroid response, when the pressure is raised more than 10 millimeters from the baseline, we can think about that is because of the steroid-induced glaucoma. Patients who experience IOP rise in setting of glucocorticoids, steroids, then we need to call them as steroid responders. All the patients who are on steroids may not develop glaucoma, but mostly the steroid responders, they respond very fast and they raise their pressures. The steroid-induced glaucoma, it depends on the potency of the glucocorticoid steroids and also the doses and the route of administration. It develops mostly, it starts 3 weeks to 6 weeks from the initial use of the steroids. And when we stop the medication, they can come to the normalize within the weeks of the cessation of the therapy. In one series, they found that 2.8% of the eyes experienced IOP elevation in the steroid usage, and they not only they are like raise their IOP, but they develop the glaucoma stage. So steroid-induced glaucoma is a secondary open-angle glaucoma. It is because of the increased resistance at the aqueous outflow. It leads to the raised IOP. There is believed to be physical and mechanical alteration in the trabecular meshwork. It leads to the steroid. Mainly, there is a formation of the cross-linked actin networks and increases the expression of the myocilin, has increased the resistance outflow, leads to the increased IOP, and when it is not addressed on time, it leads to the glaucoma. Who are the at risk for the steroid-induced glaucoma? So when we are treating the pterygium, we need to think about all these risk factors like primary open-angle glaucoma, first-degree relatives of the primary open-angle glaucoma, history of previous steroid-induced IOP elevation, type 1 diabetes. Very young age or very old age patients, because their trabecular meshwork is not fully developed, or there is a fibrous formation in the trabecular meshwork, or if the patient is associated with any connective tissue disorders. Post-PK, especially in eyes with the Fuchs endothelial dystrophy or the keratoconus or high myopia. So when we are treating these patients, we need to be very careful in using the steroids. In general, the potency of steroids as well as the frequency and duration makes the difference in the elevation of the IOP. Dexamethasone and prednisolone are more potent steroids, and they increases the IOP more than others like fluoromethalone and hydrocortisone and others. Difluprednate is the most potent steroid and one of the most steroid which increases the IOP. Studies are showing that an estimate of 3% of patients who are treated with the difluprednate causes the glaucoma. In several studies, they show that hydrocortisone causes the 3.2 millimeters of Hc, and fluoromethalone 6, and dexamethasone 8, and prednisolone 10. Can I take 1 more minute? Yeah. How to manage this steroid-induced glaucoma? If you think that if the steroids are really causing more elevation of IOP, which will further increases the glaucoma, then we need to discontinue the drugs and we need to shift them to the either to lower steroids like clotiprednol and fluoromethalone, or shift to the anti-inflammatory drugs like bromfenac and the nepafenac, or we can use the cyclosporin A, which is immunosuppressive and also a little bit of anti-inflammatory function they exhibit, so we can shift to them. And coming to the glaucoma treatment, when we shift the drug, and again we have to follow up the patient. If the pressures are under control and it is treatable with the medications, we can continue. Or still, if they are not under control, then keep the patient on the topical medication. If still it is not under control, then we can think about the laser trabeculoplasty or filtration surgery, or still it is refractive to all other treatments, then we can think of glaucoma drainage devices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So we have come towards the end of our session. Over to you, Shilpa ma'am, for your comments.
First of all, thank you, everybody. Thank all my colleagues in this IC for sharing their experience and for their wonderful talks. We have seen some really good videos, and we have also learned about the management of pterygium and cataract together, about the management of pterygium in difficult situations like double-headed pterygia, and generally about the recent techniques and overview of these techniques. Also, we have learned about how to manage coexisting glaucoma. Should the pterygium be done at all in glaucoma patients? should we be taking an inferior graft in those situations, or should we be doing an amniotic membrane graft in those kind of scenarios, and how to manage the post-operative course in those patients. We have learned from Dr. Kalyani. I think we can have any questions, if any, for the next 1 or 2 minutes before we end this IC, or any comments from the presenters. They are most welcome. I'm glad to see that participants have increased by 2 or 3 from when we started.
Because ma'am, they are waiting to start the next session. That's why. And I'm sure most of them will be watching it on YouTube live.
I hope so. So if there are no questions, really, shall we end this? And
Sure, ma'am.
Shilpa ma'am, thank you very much for this opportunity. It was good to know all of you due to this IC, I came to know all of you, and it was really wonderful talk. Dr. Mukesh, Dr. Kalyani ma'am, Shilpa ma'am, and I thank Dr. Aarti for the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. Pleasure is mine. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, Shilpa madam and Aarti and all of you. Yeah, nice to meet
thank you, Aarti, Mukesh, Kalyani, Ketki, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Ragini and MOS team for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.